I knew something was wrong the moment my husband wouldn't look me in the eye when my sister's name came up. It was a small thing, so small I almost missed it. Just a flicker, a pause too long, his hand tightening around his coffee mug like it might slip away if he didn't hold on hard enough. But after 32 years of marriage, you learn the language of silence just as well as words. That morning, the kitchen smelled like burnt toast and cheap vanilla candles I'd lit to cover it up. Outside, the garbage truck groaned its way down the street, and life kept moving like it always did. Inside me, something had already started to crack. At the time, I didn't know why. I just knew my chest felt heavy, like I'd swallowed a stone I couldn't name. And that's the cruelest part of betrayal. You feel it long before you understand it. Before everything fell apart, my life was simple in the way only middle-aged routines can be. Predictable, comfortable, maybe even a little boring if I'm being honest, but it was mine. I worked as an administrative coordinator at a local dental clinic, nothing glamorous, but steady. My husband, Mark, had been an insurance adjuster for most of our marriage. We weren't rich, but we paid our bills, took one modest vacation a year, and hosted Sunday dinners like clockwork. My sister, Lily, was 8 years younger than me. Growing up, I was more mother than sibling to her. Our own mother had passed when Lily was 16, and I stepped into the gap without thinking twice. I taught her how to budget, how to cook without burning everything, how to spot men who smiled too easily and meant nothing by it. Lily used to joke that I was her practice mom. I took that as a compliment. When she called me one rainy Tuesday evening, crying so hard I could barely understand her, my first instinct was to grab my coat and keys. "He proposed," she sobbed, "and I don't know how I'm supposed to do this. I can't afford a wedding. I don't even know where to start." I remember sitting on the edge of the bed, phone pressed to my ear, Mark reading beside me with his glasses perched low on his nose. I caught his eye and mouthed, "Lily?" He nodded, already sympathetic. Mark had always been good like that, kind, patient, the kind of man people trusted. "We'll figure it out," I told her. "You're not alone." I didn't say, "I'll pay for it right away." That came later. Over coffee, over spreadsheets, over late-night conversations where Lily talked about flowers and dresses with the excitement of someone who had waited her whole life to be chosen. Mark was the one who said it first, actually. "She's family," he told me as we washed dishes one night. "If we can help, we should." So I did. I paid for the venue, a converted barn with white draping and fairy lights. I paid for the dress, the catering, the photographer, the string quartet Lily insisted would make it timeless. I dipped into savings we'd earmarked for renovations, told myself it was worth it. I told myself love was an investment. The wedding day arrived warm and bright, the kind of day people describe as perfect. Lily looked radiant, laughing too loudly, hugging everyone twice. Mark was attentive, helpful, everywhere he needed to be. He carried boxes, coordinated with the caterer, even fixed a loose chair leg with tools he'd borrowed from the venue manager. People kept telling me how lucky Lily had to have a sister like me. I smiled until my cheeks hurt. At the reception, I watched my sister dance with her new husband under the lights I'd paid for. I remember feeling proud, tired, full in that quiet way that comes from doing something good and expecting nothing back. If someone had told me then what was already beginning, what seeds had already been planted, I would have laughed, or maybe cried, but I certainly wouldn't have believed them. Because betrayal doesn't arrive dressed like a villain. It comes wrapped in familiarity, in shared jokes, in the safety of people you trust with your life. After the wedding, things settled into a new rhythm. Lily and her husband went on a short honeymoon. Mark and I went back to work. Life resumed. But there were changes, subtle at first. Mark started staying late more often. Quarter-end reports, he'd say, loosening his tie. Lily texted me constantly, memes, questions, complaints about married life that felt performative, like she needed reassurance more than advice. Then there were the missed calls. I'd call Lily and get voicemail, only to have her call back hours later, breathless. Mark's phone would buzz during dinner, and he'd flip it face down without reading the message. When I asked, he said it was work. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was tired, that I was adjusting to being needed less. Still, my body knew before my mind did. I stopped sleeping well. I woke up at 3 a.m. for no reason, staring at the ceiling while Mark breathed steadily beside me. I'd listen to the clicking of the clock and feel like it was counting down to something I didn't want to face. One evening, Lily came over unannounced. She stood in my kitchen, twisting her wedding ring around her finger, eyes darting everywhere but my face. Mark was still at work. "Marriage is harder than I thought," she said, voice small. "It usually is," I replied gently. She hesitated, then smiled too quickly. "You're lucky, you and Mark. You make it look easy." Something in her tone made my skin prickle. That night, when Mark finally came home, I asked him, casually, how Lily was doing. He paused, just for a second. "I think she's figuring things out," he said. And again, he didn't look at me. I went to bed with a headache and a knot in my stomach, telling myself I was being paranoid, that love doesn't betray you this quietly, that sisters don't cross lines like that. I didn't know then that the truth was already circling closer, waiting. The first real crack appeared on an ordinary Thursday afternoon, the kind of day that usually slips through your fingers unnoticed. I had come home early with a migraine blooming behind my eyes. The house was quiet in that hollow mid-afternoon way. No television, no footsteps, just the refrigerator humming like it was keeping a secret. I kicked off my shoes and set my purse on the entry table, already planning a cup of tea in a dark room. That's when I heard Mark's laptop chime. It was coming from the guest room. We didn't usually use that room except when Lily visited. The bed was neatly made, the curtains always half drawn. Mark had worked from home occasionally, but he preferred the dining table where the light was better. I stood there longer than I care to admit, keys still in my hand, listening. There was no talking, no laughter, just the soft clicking of keys. I told myself not to be ridiculous. People move rooms, laptops travel, marriages don't unravel because of a notification sound. Still, I walked down the hallway slowly, my headache forgotten. The door was open. Mark sat on the edge of the guest bed, laptop balanced on his knees. He looked up so fast I almost flinched. "Oh," he said, closing the screen halfway. "You're home early?" His voice was too bright, like he'd practiced it. "A headache," I replied. "What are you doing in here?" He gestured vaguely. "Better Wi-Fi." I nodded, even though the router was in the living room. As I turned to leave, I noticed something on the dresser, a folded scarf, pale blue, silk. I knew that scarf. I'd helped Lily pick it out months earlier, telling her it brought out her eyes. I remembered because she'd laughed and said, "I hope my future husband notices things like that." I stopped walking. "Lily was here?" I asked, keeping my tone light. Mark's answer came a second too late. "Yes," he said. "She stopped by." "When?" "This morning." "For what?" He shrugged. "Just to talk." I wanted to ask about what, but the word stuck. Instead, I smiled, told him I was going to lie down. In the bedroom, I closed the door and sat on the edge of the bed, heart pounding hard enough to make my ears ring. There was an explanation for everything. There always was. Maybe Lily had forgotten her scarf. Maybe Mark hadn't wanted to disturb me. Maybe I was projecting my own anxieties onto harmless coincidences. That's what I told myself. Over the next few weeks, the small things piled up like dust you pretend not to see. Lily started dropping by more often, but only when I wasn't home. She'd mention it casually later as if it meant nothing. "Oh, I saw Mark today. He fixed the sink for me." Or, Your husband is such a good listener. You're lucky." Mark, meanwhile, grew distant in a way that was hard to describe to anyone else. He was still kind, still attentive, but his affection felt careful, measured, like he was afraid of giving too much away. One night we were folding laundry together, the television murmuring in the background. "Do you think Lily is happy?" I asked. He froze, a towel clenched between his hands. "I think she's adjusting," he said. "You already said that." He nodded, folding the towel with exaggerated precision. "It's a big change." I watched his face, searching for something I could name. Guilt, fear, anything. "Have you been talking to her a lot?" I pressed. He glanced up, then away. "She reaches out sometimes." "About what?" "Life," he said. That word life felt too big, too intimate. I laughed softly. "Since when did my husband become my sister's therapist?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You're reading too much into it." Maybe I was, but I started noticing how often his phone buzzed at night, how he angled the screen away from me, how Lily stopped mentioning her husband altogether, as if he'd faded into the background of her life. One Sunday, Lily came to dinner. She wore that blue scarf. She barely touched her food, picking at her plate while Mark refilled her wine glass without being asked. Their movements around each other were easy, familiar, like they'd practiced. At one point, I excused myself to use the bathroom. When I returned, I heard their voices in the kitchen, low, urgent. "I told you we had to be careful," Lily said. "I know," Mark replied. She didn't hear anything. I stood still, heart pounding, my hand gripping the hallway wall. Careful about what? When I stepped into the kitchen, they jumped apart like teenagers caught doing something they shouldn't. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Yes," Lily said too quickly. "Just talking about work." I didn't call her out. I didn't scream. I didn't accuse. I did something worse. I started watching. I checked phone records, not messages, I wasn't ready for that, but call logs. Lily's number appeared far too often, late at night, early mornings. I paid attention to body language, to how Mark's voice softened when he said her name, to how Lily avoided my eyes when I hugged her goodbye. The night I finally let myself believe something was wrong, I cried quietly in the shower, water pounding against my shoulders so Mark wouldn't hear me. Because if I named it, if I said the words out loud, it would become real. And some betrayals feel too big to survive naming. Still, truth has a way of surfacing no matter how deeply you bury it. Mine came wrapped in a forgotten phone and a message that was never meant for me. The phone was face down on the coffee table when I found it. That detail matters because Mark never left his phone unattended, not ever. He took it to the bathroom, he took it outside to check the mail. He once went back inside after locking the car because he'd forgotten it on the kitchen counter. But that evening, it lay there like it had been abandoned. Mark was in the shower. I could hear the water running upstairs, steady and loud. The television murmured in the background, some game show I wasn't watching. I had just finished wiping down the kitchen counters when I noticed it. At first, I didn't move. I stood there, sponge in my hand, staring at the phone like it might bite me. I told myself not to touch it, that everyone deserves privacy, that I was crossing a line even considering it. Then it buzzed. Once, twice. The screen lit up. Lily, blue. My vision narrowed, the edges of the room going soft. I don't remember sitting down, but suddenly I was on the couch, phone in my hand, heart pounding so hard it made my fingers tremble. The message preview glowed against the dark screen. "I can still smell you on me." For a moment, my mind refused to process the words. They didn't make sense. They couldn't belong to my life, to my marriage, to my sister. But my thumb moved anyway. The phone unlocked easily. Our anniversary. the date we'd celebrated with takeout and a movie because we were tired. The messages opened like a wound. I didn't read everything. I couldn't. My brain latched onto fragments, sentences out of order, moments stolen and stitched together into something monstrous. Last night was a mistake. I miss you already. We have to be careful. She trusts us. I felt something leave my body then. Not pain, not yet. Something quieter, like air escaping a room that had been sealed too long. I scrolled back weeks, then months. It hadn't started after the wedding. It had started before. In the shower upstairs, the water shut off. I set the phone down carefully, exactly where I'd found it, my hand shaking so badly I had to grip my knees to steady myself. I didn't cry, not then. I walked into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water I didn't drink. I stared at the clock on the microwave and watched the seconds tick forward, each one landing heavy in my chest. When Mark came downstairs, towel slung over his shoulder, he smiled at me. "Everything okay?" he asked. I nodded. "Fine." My voice sounded like someone else's. That night, I lay awake listening to him breathe. I studied the familiar lines of his face in the dark, the man I'd built a life with, raised children with, trusted with every version of myself. Beside him, I felt like a stranger in my own bed. The next morning, I called in sick to work. I told Mark I still had a headache. He kissed my forehead before leaving, his lips lingering half a second too long. I waited until his car pulled out of the driveway. Then I called Lily. She answered on the third ring, breathless. "Hey, are you okay?" "Yes," I said. "Can you come over? I need to talk." There was a pause. "Is something wrong?" "I just need my sister." Another pause, longer this time. "I'll be there in an hour." She arrived wearing sunglasses, even though it was cloudy. She hugged me tightly, her body stiff against mine. "What's going on?" she asked. I gestured toward the couch. "Sit." She did, crossing her legs, twisting that wedding ring around her finger. I sat across from her, folding my hands in my lap so she wouldn't see them shake. "I went through Mark's phone," I said. The color drained from her face. "I saw the messages." She opened her mouth, then closed it. Her eyes filled, fast and dramatic. "It wasn't supposed to happen," she whispered. Those words landed harder than any confession could have. "How long?" I asked. She looked down. "Since before the wedding." I felt the room tilt. "Before?" I repeated. She nodded, tears spilling over. "I didn't plan it, I swear. He was just there. He listened. He understood me." "And I didn't?" I asked quietly. She flinched. "That's not what I meant." I leaned back, my spine pressed against the couch cushions. "You slept with my husband, repeatedly, in my house." She sobbed then, covering her face. "I hate myself for it." I watched her cry and felt nothing, not rage, not sorrow, just a vast, empty stillness. "When were you going to tell me?" I asked. She shook her head. "I didn't know how." "Were you ever?" I pressed. Silence. That was answer enough. When Mark came home that evening, Lily was gone. I'd asked her to leave. I'd watched her walk to her car, shoulders shaking, the blue scarf trailing behind her like a ghost. Mark stopped short when he saw my face. "You know," he said. "Yes," I replied. He set his keys down slowly, like any sudden movement might shatter something fragile. "I can explain." "Don't," I said. My voice was calm, even. "Just tell me the truth." He sank into a chair, rubbing his face with his hands. "I never meant to hurt you." That sentence, that tired, cowardly sentence, finally cracked something open. "You paid for her wedding. We paid for her wedding, while you were sleeping with her." He didn't deny it. "I love you," he said weakly. I laughed then, a short, sharp sound that startled even me. No, I said. You loved the comfort I provided while you betrayed me. He reached for me. I stood. I need you to leave, I said. Tonight? Yes. He stared at me stunned. Where am I supposed to go? I thought of Lily, of all the nights they'd shared behind my back. Figure it out, I said. When the door closed behind him, the house felt unbearably quiet. That was the moment the shock finally gave way to grief. I slid down the wall and cried till my throat burned. But beneath the heartbreak, something else was forming. Clarity. Grief doesn't arrive all at once. It seeps in slow and heavy, filling the quiet spaces you didn't know were hollow until they echoed. The first night alone, I slept on my side of the bed, curled around the absence where Mark used to be. I woke every hour, reaching out without thinking, my hand meeting cold sheets instead of familiar warmth. Each time, the truth hit me fresh, like a bruise you forget about until you touch it. By morning, my eyes were swollen, my head pounding. I made coffee I didn't drink and stood at the kitchen window, watching the neighbor's dog dig in the yard, life going on without me. That's when the anger came. Not loud, not explosive, focused. I called a lawyer before noon. Her name was Denise. Her voice was calm, efficient, like she'd heard my story 1,000 times before. Infidelity complicates things emotionally, she said, but financially you need to protect yourself. Protect myself. Those words felt foreign, like a language I was only beginning to learn. That afternoon, Mark came back to collect clothes. I stayed in the living room while he moved through the house upstairs. Drawers opened, closets sighed. The sound of his life being packed into bags made my chest ache. When he came down, he stood awkwardly near the door. "I'm so sorry," he said. I studied his face, searching for the man I'd loved. All I saw was someone who had chosen himself over everyone else. "You don't get to apologize to me anymore," I said. "You lost that right." He swallowed. "What about Lily?" That name felt like acid. "What about her?" I asked. "She's devastated." I met his eyes. "So am I. The difference is I didn't earn it." He flinched. That night, my phone rang. It was Lily. I let it go to voicemail. Then she texted, "Please, I need to talk to you." I didn't respond. Instead, I started gathering documents, bank statements, credit card bills, emails. I discovered charges I didn't recognize, hotel rooms, dinners for two, weekend trips Mark claimed were work conferences. Some of them lined up with dates Lily had been visiting friends. The betrayal deepened with every detail. A week later, my sister showed up at my door. I saw her through the peephole, shoulders hunched, eyes red. For a moment, I considered not answering. Then I remembered all the years I'd been her shield. I opened the door. She burst into tears the second she saw me. "I lost everything," she sobbed. "My husband left. He found out." I said nothing. "I never meant for it to go this far," she continued. "Mark told me you'd never know, that he'd handle it." That right there was the moment my grief turned sharp. "He told me I'd never know," I repeated. She nodded, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "So you trusted him," I said slowly, "more than you trusted me." She opened her mouth, then closed it. "I need your help," she whispered. I stepped back, giving her space to enter, then gestured toward the couch. "Sit." She perched on the edge, eyes darting. "You want my help?" I asked, "after sleeping with my husband in my house?" She winced. "I know I don't deserve it." "No," I agreed, "you don't." She began to cry again. "I have nowhere to go." I felt something settle in my chest, heavy, solid. "You can't stay here," I said calmly. Her head snapped up. "Please." "I won't fund your destruction of my life," I said. "I've already done enough." She stared at me like she didn't recognize me. "This isn't who you are," she said. I thought about that, about who I'd been, the fixer, the giver, the one who smoothed things over. "No," I said, "this is who I'm becoming." She left shortly after, her footsteps echoing down the porch steps. In the weeks that followed, word spread. Family found out, friends chose sides. Some people avoided me entirely, unsure what to say. Others called late at night, voices hushed and sympathetic. Mark moved into an apartment across town. Lily moved back in with our aunt. I filed for divorce. The paperwork was thick and impersonal, but there was something grounding about signing my name, about choosing myself on paper, even when my heart still felt fractured. One afternoon, I attended my niece's school recital. Lily was there, sitting 2 rows ahead. We didn't acknowledge each other. Afterward, my niece ran into my arms, laughing. In that moment, I realized something important. The betrayal had tried to take everything, but it hadn't succeeded. I still had my dignity, my values, my capacity to love without destroying others. The legal process moved slowly but steadily. Mark didn't fight it. Maybe guilt finally found him. Maybe he was just tired. Then came the final hearing. I stood in the courtroom, hands clasped, listening as our marriage was reduced to dates and assets. When it was over, Mark approached me one last time. "I hope you can forgive me," he said. I looked at him, really looked. "Forgiveness isn't about you," I replied. "It's about me not carrying your choices anymore." He swallowed, eyes downcast. As I walked out of that building, sunlight hit my face, warm and real. I took a deep breath. For the first time in months, my chest didn't feel so tight. Healing doesn't announce itself. It arrives quietly, disguised as ordinary moments you don't realize are stitching you back together until one day you notice you're breathing easier. After the divorce was finalized, I stayed busy, not in a frantic way, but deliberately. I repainted the guest room, the same room where I'd once found that blue scarf folded like it belonged there. I chose a soft, warm gray and opened the windows wide, letting fresh air push out whatever memories clung to the walls. I donated the bedspread. I kept the dresser. Small choices, powerful ones. Some mornings, grief still surprised me. It crept in while I buttered toast or folded towels, catching me off guard with a memory of a laugh or a shared look that no longer belonged to my present. But those moments didn't knock me down the way they used to. They passed through me like weather, uncomfortable but temporary. Lily tried to reach out again. At first, it was through text messages I didn't answer, then emails, long, rambling apologies filled with regret and self-pity. She said she was in therapy, that she finally understood what she'd done, that she missed me. I believed she was sorry. I just wasn't ready. One afternoon, months later, I ran into her at the grocery store. We stood in the produce aisle between the apples and the oranges, both of us frozen by the sight of the other. She looked thinner, older. "Hi," she said quietly. "Hi," I replied. There was a long pause, the hum of the refrigerator units filling the space between us. "I never thanked you," she said, "for everything you did for me, even after what I did." I nodded once. "You're welcome." She swallowed. "Do you think someday we could talk?" I considered it. Not the old reflexive yes, a real consideration. Someday, but not today. She accepted that, tears brimming but unshed, and for the first time I felt something close to peace about it. Mark, on the other hand, faded from my life quickly. He sent a few emails early on, updates about paperwork, apologies that grew shorter with time. Eventually, they stopped altogether. I didn't miss him the way I thought I would. What I missed was who I'd been before the betrayal. Open, trusting, generous to a fault. But I was learning that generosity without boundaries is just self-erasure. I took a solo trip that fall. Nothing extravagant, just a small coastal town with salt in the air and time to think. I walked along the beach every morning, the cold water numbing my feet, reminding me I was still here, still capable of feeling. One evening, sitting on a bench watching the sun melt into the ocean, I realized something important. I wasn't broken. I'd been wounded deeply, but wounds heal when you stop reopening them. When I returned home, I started volunteering at a women's resource center. Listening to other stories of betrayal and rebuilding reminded me I wasn't alone and that survival comes in many forms. Sometimes it's loud and defiant. Sometimes it's quiet and steady. On the anniversary of the wedding, the one I paid for, I lit a candle in my living room, not out of bitterness, but acknowledgement of the woman I'd been, of the lessons I'd learned the hard way. I blew it out and went to bed without tears. That felt like progress. Time has a way of smoothing the sharpest edges, not by erasing what happened, but by teaching you how to live around it. By the second year after the divorce, my life no longer felt like something I was rebuilding from rubble. It felt like something new, simpler, quieter, but truer. I woke up when I wanted, ate what I liked, left dishes in the sink without worrying who might judge me for it. I laughed more easily, even surprised myself sometimes. And then Lily called again. This time I answered. Her voice was different, less frantic, less desperate, steadier. I heard you started volunteering, she said. Yes, I replied. That sounds like you. I didn't respond to that. We talked about safe things at first, work, our aunt's health, the weather. There were pauses that felt awkward but necessary, like muscles stretching after being still too long. I don't expect forgiveness, she said finally. I just wanted you to know I'm trying to be better, even if that doesn't include me being close to you again. I appreciated that, the absence of expectation, the humility. I hope you are, I said honestly. We met for coffee a few weeks later, neutral ground, public, daytime. She arrived early, standing when she saw me. We hugged, briefly, carefully, like people relearning the shape of each other. She didn't cry. That mattered. I'm not asking for things to go back to how they were, she said. I know they can't. No, I agreed. They can't. But maybe, someday, we could build something different. I stirred my coffee, watching the cream swirl. Maybe, I said, and this time I meant it. Healing doesn't require forgetting, it requires honesty and patience. That winter, I redecorated the living room, new curtains, a rug with deep blues and soft golds. I replaced the couch where I'd once sat holding Mark's phone, my heart shattering in silence. It felt symbolic, necessary. On a cold January evening, I hosted my first dinner party since everything happened. The small one, close friends, warm food, laughter that filled the room without forcing itself. At one point, I caught myself smiling for no reason at all. That's when I knew I was okay. Not untouched, not unchanged, but okay. Sometimes late at night, I still think about the wedding, the money I spent, the love I gave freely to people who didn't protect it. But I don't regret being generous. I regret that they were careless with my trust. There's a difference. I learned that love doesn't mean sacrificing your dignity, that family doesn't get a lifetime pass to hurt you, that boundaries are not punishments, they're protections. Most of all, I learned that betrayal says more about the betrayer than the one betrayed. If you're listening to this and you've been hurt by someone you never imagined could wound you like that, I want you to know something. You're not foolish for loving deeply. You're brave. Just don't forget to love yourself with the same intensity. Sometimes healing looks like peace. Other times it looks like remembering without flinching. There are evenings now when I sit alone at my kitchen table, a cup of tea cooling beside me, and I let myself remember everything, not with longing, not with rage, but with clarity. The wedding, the laughter, the trust I gave so freely, the way I believed that love, once earned, was unbreakable. I don't rush those memories away anymore. For a long time, I thought strength meant refusing to look back, but I've learned that true strength is being able to look back and still choose to move forward. People sometimes ask me if I regret paying for that wedding. They expect bitterness in my answer, but the truth is more complicated. I regret who I trusted, not how I loved. I loved openly, I loved generously, I loved without keeping score. And while that left me vulnerable, it also means I don't have to rewrite my past to survive my present. I didn't become small. I didn't become cruel. I didn't let betrayal turn me into someone I wouldn't recognize. That matters more than people realize. What betrayal really steals from you isn't just relationships. It tries to steal your sense of self. It whispers that you were naive, foolish, weak, that you should have known better, that your kindness was a flaw. But kindness is not a flaw. It only becomes dangerous when it's given to people who don't respect it. There were nights after everything came out when I lay awake replaying conversations, searching for clues, wondering how I could have missed something so enormous happening right under my roof. I blamed myself for trusting too easily, for believing in family loyalty, for assuming love had boundaries it would never cross. Eventually, I realized something important. The ability to deceive so deeply does not belong to the trusting, it belongs to the deceiver. I didn't imagine the world wrongly. They chose to lie within it. That distinction saved me. It allowed me to forgive myself first. And that forgiveness, quiet, internal, deeply personal, was the beginning of my freedom. I didn't rush forgiveness for them. I still haven't fully, and that's okay. Forgiveness isn't a deadline. It isn't a performance. It isn't something owed simply because time has passed. Sometimes healing doesn't mean reconciling. Sometimes it means redefining. My relationship with my sister exists now in a cautious, limited way. We speak, we acknowledge each other's humanity, but we no longer pretend that love erases consequences. We no longer confuse shared history with unquestioned access. That boundary cost me grief, but it gave me peace. As for my ex-husband, I wish him no harm, but I no longer carry his name, his choices, or his guilt. He made his decisions as a grown man. I released myself from the burden of understanding why. Some answers don't heal, they only reopen wounds. What healed me was choosing myself every day afterward, in small ways, ordinary ways, saying no without explaining, leaving rooms that felt uncomfortable, trusting my instincts again, allowing joy back in without suspicion. There's a particular kind of loneliness that follows betrayal, the loneliness of realizing the people you counted on most were never who you thought they were. That loneliness doesn't disappear overnight, but over time it changes shape. It becomes quieter, less accusatory. Eventually, it turns into discernment. I still believe in love, deeply, fiercely, but now I believe love must be mutual, accountable, and safe. I believe family should protect you, not test how much pain you'll tolerate to keep them close. And I believe women, especially women who give endlessly, need to hear this more often. You are not required to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. If you've been listening to my story and seeing pieces of your own life reflected back at you, I want you to pause for a moment. Ask yourself, who benefits from my silence? Who benefits from my forgiveness when I haven't healed? Who benefits when I minimize my pain to keep the peace? And then ask the most important question of all, What do I need now? It took me a long time to stop asking that question with guilt attached, to stop feeling selfish for wanting peace, to stop apologizing for boundaries that protected my sanity. But once I did, something remarkable happened. My life got quieter, and in that quiet, I found myself again. If I could offer one lesson from everything I lived through, it would be this: love does not require self-betrayal. Family does not excuse cruelty, and healing does not require anyone else's permission. You don't have to scream your truth to be valid. You don't have to prove your pain to justify leaving, and you don't have to forgive on anyone else's timeline. You are allowed to survive in the way that keeps you whole. So I'll leave you with this, not as advice, not as instruction, but as an invitation to reflect. If the people you sacrificed for were the ones who hurt you most, if the love you gave was used against you, if you're standing at the edge of a choice between keeping the peace and keeping yourself, what would you choose now? And more importantly, what do you think you deserve? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Even now, years later, I sometimes think about the little moments that made the betrayal sting the most. The quiet ones, the unnoticed ones, the ones that lived in ordinary spaces of my life. The blue scarf folded neatly on the guest room dresser, the messages left unread until the timing made them undeniable, the way laughter sounded from a room I thought was safe. Those moments replay in my mind like a muted film, familiar but distant, no longer capable of cutting as deep. I remember one evening in particular. It was early autumn, the leaves outside a dull orange, drifting in lazy spirals from the trees. I had lit a candle in the living room and was sitting at my writing desk, sorting through old family photographs. Pictures of Lily and me as children, messy-haired and mischievous, smiling without a care. The photographs were like echoes from another life. One hand held the past, and the other held the present, my chest caught firmly between them. I had been thinking about forgiveness a lot lately, not for them, but for me. I realized that forgiving someone else too soon is often just a way of denying the pain. True forgiveness begins with recognizing what happened, feeling it fully, and then choosing not to carry it as a chain. I thought about Lily, about the sister I raised, about how much I had given and how little she respected it. I understood in a cold, clear way that her apology, as heartfelt as it might have been, could never erase what she had done. And yet I also recognized that holding on to rage was not a measure of justice, it was a measure of my captivity. I thought about Mark, about the man I had loved and trusted, the man who had whispered my name while betraying me, about the years we shared, the children we raised, the life we built together. I couldn't erase the memories of him, the kindness he once showed, the nights of laughter, the mundane comfort of his presence, but I could erase his hold over my future, and that was enough. I started small, the way you rebuild a home after a storm. I repainted walls, rearranged furniture, bought new sheets that smelled faintly of lavender. I started volunteering at the Women's Resource Center, listening to stories not so different from my own. Each story, each tear, each quiet victory reminded me that I was not alone, and that survival is not simply enduring. Survival is living again. I began to notice my own resilience, the quiet strength I had forgotten I possessed, the ability to care for myself in ways I had once reserved for others, making dinner for one and really savoring it, walking in the park without an agenda, laughing at a joke on TV without a shadow of guilt, feeling the sun on my skin without wishing it were someone else beside me. Then, one afternoon, I received a message from Lily. Not an apology, not a plea, just a simple, measured note. I hope you are finding peace. I am trying to too. I stared at it for a long time. No anger, no flinching, just acknowledgement. I didn't respond immediately. I sat with it for hours, letting the words settle around me. And eventually, I realized that I could accept her message without allowing her back into the parts of my life that were private, protected, and sacred. Forgiveness, I understood, isn't always about reconciliation. It's not always about rebuilding what was broken. Sometimes it's about releasing the weight you carry for others so you can finally breathe. That evening, I brewed a cup of tea and stepped onto my balcony. The air was crisp with the smell of early frost, tinged with damp leaves and the faint scent of wood smoke from the neighbor's chimney. I watched the street lights flicker on one by one, the sky fading from pale blue to gray. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of fullness. Not joy in its flashy, celebratory form, but a quiet, steady satisfaction. I realized that part of moving forward was honoring myself, accepting that I deserved a life that didn't include betrayal, manipulation, or secrecy, accepting that I deserved happiness even if it looked different from what I imagined before, accepting that I could still love without being consumed by it, still trust without being naive, still give without being exploited. Over the next few months, life unfolded in ways that surprised me. I started taking art classes, something I had always wanted to do but had put off to support others. I reconnected with friends who had drifted away, people who had known me before the betrayal and loved me regardless of the choices I had made. I traveled alone for the first time in decades, carrying nothing but a small suitcase, my journal, and a camera. And each step reminded me that the world had not ended because my heart had been broken. It had expanded to accommodate my own care. One evening, as I sat by the window with my tea and journal, I reflected on everything: the loss, the anger, the quiet moments of triumph, the slow rebuilding. I thought about how easily people dismiss the damage betrayal can do, how quickly they tell you to move on or let it go, as if pain is something to tidy up and store away. But real healing is different. It's messy, it's uneven, it's taking one step at a time and sometimes needing to take two steps back before moving forward again. And yet, despite everything, I felt grateful. Grateful for my own strength, grateful for the clarity I had gained, grateful for the small, ordinary joys that remind me that life can still be gentle even after it hurts you deeply. So, here I am, telling the story to you, not to elicit pity, not to expose the shame of others, but to offer a hand to anyone who has walked a similar path. Betrayal is devastating. It can shake the foundation of everything you thought was safe. But it doesn't have to define your future. You can reclaim your life. You can set boundaries. You can choose yourself. And you can find peace, even if it arrives slowly, quietly, and unexpectedly. I leave you with this thought. If someone you trusted the most has hurt you, if love and loyalty have been taken for granted, remember this: you are allowed to protect your heart. You are allowed to prioritize yourself. And you are allowed to find joy again, even in the spaces that once felt broken. I wonder now, as I look back on my story, what you would do in my place. Would you have confronted them immediately? Would you have waited like I did, letting the truth settle before taking action? Would you have walked away entirely or tried to salvage the relationship? I'd love for you to share your thoughts, your experiences, your lessons, because stories like mine are not just mine. They belong to anyone who has loved, lost, and learned to stand again. And if you've been following my journey, if this story has touched you even a little, I want you to know you are not alone. Betrayal may have taken a piece of your life, but it cannot take your dignity. It cannot take your strength, and it certainly cannot take your future unless you allow it to. So ask yourself, what do you deserve? And then take that first quiet step towards claiming it. Because the most important story you will ever live is the one you write for yourself.